Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the y'all mean of revolution, revolutionary salute. Family, Putin says Zelensky. Is dead man walking? Does Trump agree? Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Revolutionary salute, family. Let's get right into this World War III update. Zelensky doesn't know what to do. Everything is crumbling around him. And Putin says as soon as this is over, he's over. Snow in Texas. It's definitely snowing, family. Montana or something around here.
Insiders in Kiev continue to record the deterioration of the psychological state of the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky. In particular, sources in the office of the Ukrainian president confirmed that over the past 72 hours, Volodymyr Zelensky has been visited by several groups of doctors from Europe. It is reported that they were mostly psychiatrists and neuropathologists. According to insiders, Volodymyr Zelensky continues to take painfully the territorial losses of the Ukrainian army in the Donbass and the Kursk region. Unfortunately for the head of the Kiev regime, his entourage does not always succeed in hiding from him the failures of the Ukrainian army on the battlefield. All this has a very negative effect on the physical and psychological state of the illegitimate president of Ukraine. In addition, Volodymyr Zelensky also received another crushing blow from the Trump administration. As it turned out, the head of the Kiev regime literally begged the Trump administration to invite him to the inauguration ceremony of the 47th President of the United States. However, he was rejected in an exquisitely ignominious and insulting manner. In particular, Donald Trump's son officially stated that Volodymyr Zelensky begged the U.S. authorities 3 times to invite him to the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. And he was rejected at every attempt. At the same time, Donald Trump's son added that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is a real weirdo. The funniest part is that he asked for an invite like 3 times unofficially, and each time got turned down. Now he is acting like he decided not to go himself. What a weirdo, Donald John Trump Jr. said. Moreover, as it turned out, the head of the office of the Ukrainian president, Andrei Yermak, offered $100 million to American officials representing the pro-Ukrainian lobby in Washington to arrange Volodymyr Zelensky's arrival at Donald Trump's inauguration. However, fearing a negative reaction from Donald Trump, these American officials denied Kiev's request.
Trump don't got time for that sucker. It's over for the cokehead Zelensky.
The fact that the Trump administration refused to invite the head of the Kiev regime to the inauguration ceremony indicates that Volodymyr Zelensky will be removed from power in 2025. This statement was made by an authoritative expert and professor at the University of Ottawa, Ivan Kachanovsky. According to him, Volodymyr Zelensky is of no interest to the new U.S. administration, especially given the fact that Moscow has officially stated that Russia will not sign any documents with the illegitimate president of Ukraine. According to Ukrainian businessman and former Ukrainian politician, Viktor Medvedchuk, the war's end is not beneficial to Volodymyr Zelensky. Viktor Medvedchuk noted that this political clown is only interested in money. The more the Ukrainian people suffer from the war, the more money this war criminal receives from the West. However, with the coming to power of Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky risks losing not only huge cash injections, but also the post of head of Ukraine. The fact is that the Trump administration is well aware that the current war unleashed by the West has made Russia and the countries of the global South much stronger both economically and militarily. At the same time, the so-called collective West, led by the United States, has become much weaker and has lost its leading positions in the economy and military power. As you may remember, I have said many times that after 1991, after the collapse of the USSR, the West, led by the United States, felt victorious in the Cold War and began to ignore the national interests of other countries. And this has become Washington's biggest strategic mistake. For 30 years, the United States has promoted the formula of a unipolar world, forcing other countries to obey Washington. And those countries that refused to obey the rules set by the collective West were subjected to harsh economic sanctions, color revolutions, and even military attacks. As a result, the United States perceived itself as the dominant power on Earth, causing a swift decline in Washington's foreign policy effectiveness. As a result, over the past 3 decades, American diplomats and security agencies, including the CIA, have begun to make many strategic mistakes. For example, in 2014, the United States was confident that the coup d'etat in Ukraine, organized by the CIA, would help weaken Moscow so much that within 10 years, Russia would repeat the fate of the USSR. However, as time has shown, the United States has failed to achieve none of its objectives. The outbreak of war in Ukraine not only did not weaken Moscow, but also significantly strengthened Russia in both the military sphere and the economy. Moreover, Russia has also managed to regain its prestige in the international arena, as well as its status as a superpower. In 2024, the Russian army took first place in the world ranking, displacing the United States from this pedestal. And Russia's economy has become the largest in Europe, and has entered the top 5 most powerful and largest economies in the world, overtaking countries such as Germany and Japan.
They don't want to talk about that on the news.
As for the United States, the Ukrainian issue has significantly undermined Washington's authority in the international arena. The United States has finally lost its hegemonic status and its unipolar form of government. The world has seen Western weapons' weakness and vulnerability in real combat conditions. The world has seen how weak the Western military-industrial complex is compared with the Russian one. In addition, the whole world has also seen the inability of the United States to defend its so-called allies. In 2022, the Biden administration was confident that the United States, with the help of other NATO countries, including Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, could easily strangle Russia and tear it to pieces. However, in reality, Washington's actions have had the opposite effect. Russia has been reborn as a superpower. Moreover, Moscow's power and influence began to increase with each new year. In addition, Russia has acquired new territories rich in natural resources. And after the end of the war, these new territories will further strengthen Moscow's economic potential. The United States also failed to stop supplies of Russian gas to Europe. Russian gas supplies to Europe still continue through the mediation of third parties. Thus, Moscow continues to receive its income, while Europe has to pay double the price for this gas. As for the West's puppet Zelensky, an influential Russian politician and State Duma deputy, Anatoly Vasserman, said that the head of the Kiev regime is a walking dead. According to him, Volodymyr Zelensky is a war criminal, and Russia will eliminate him after the end of the war. At the same time, he explained that currently, Zelensky's death is not beneficial to Moscow, since the West can declare this comedian a martyr, who gave his life for the freedom of Ukraine. Against this backdrop, there is a strong possibility that the West itself will decide to physically eliminate Zelensky before the end of the war, to denigrate Russia once again. In any case, no matter how events develop, it becomes clear that this comedian is doomed, and that this war criminal will not be able to enjoy the stolen billions after the end of the war.
A fantastic coincidence because they had time to pick that date,
Netanyahu definitely next.
and they picked it 3 days before on a Friday. They knew that the inauguration would be the 20th. So that's what makes it extraordinary, because this is two of the top BRICS. Let's say there are top 4 BRICS: Russia, China, India, and Iran. 2 of them, they strike a comprehensive strategic partnership that had been discussed for over 2 years in every sphere, including military. So this is about Eurasia integration, about BRICS integration, and about integration of the global majority and global south at the highest level. And intervening 3 days before the start of the new Manifest Destiny era, or the new golden years, well, I think most of the global majority and the global south, they did get the message.
Well, what is the message?
The message
what is the message to them? What is the message to Trump?
The message to the global majority, and also to the global north, and also to the new administration, is that 2 of the big powers that are trying to configure the new multipolar, or according to Ambassador Chas Freeman, the best definition, multinodal world, they are linked for the first time in their modern history by deep relationship and at the highest level, and they are a collaboration on all fronts: energy, investments, culture, and also military as well. And coming from 2 top BRICS, this is especially significant because the number 1 multilateral organization across the planet that is conforming and coordinating the building of this new system of international relations is BRICS. And BRICS Plus, BRICS Plus, the partners. And Iran is a full BRICS member. And Russia last year, they had an enormous job of positioning BRICS for the next level, which is what happened during the summit in Kazan in October. So this is it's not an alliance against the West or an alliance against the US. But the message to the West and to the collective West is, look, these are 2 top powers of the emerging new system of international relations, so you have to pay attention to us.
What does it say about security and defense?
Very, very important. It's not a formal military alliance. It's not an alliance pact, but it says that an attack on one of them, the other signature of the deal will help, and they will never help the aggressor. So let's assume Iran is attacked by Israel or by an Israel-US coalition, for instance. It's not that Russia is going to step into the fray immediately, but there will be all sorts of support for Iran just like China, without even signing. China has a strategic partnership with Iran as well, and it's also military, not as sophisticated as the Russian-Iran on a military level. But this means that, look, we got your back, essentially.
What will happen if Israel attacks Iran vis-a-vis Russia and China? What will they do?
Nobody knows, Judge, really. This is extremely serious. This is analyzed in detail in Tehran, in Moscow, and in Beijing. They consider the scenarios, similar scenarios that the Pentagon does, for instance. And all the scenarios, by the way, that the Pentagon gamed on a war against Iran, total defeat. They know that this would be an extreme measure by Israel, and if Israel managed to drag the US into it. This is essentially how the Iranians examine the whole situation. And they think that the probability is very, very low. And they know that now, especially now with an administration that professes that we don't want to generate or start new wars, now the possibility is still very, very low. But never underestimate the power to wreak havoc by the neocons in the US and those Old Testament demented people in Tel Aviv.
Well, the Old Testament demented people in Tel Aviv probably still have the same iron lock on the American government under Donald Trump as they did under Joe Biden.
Exactly.
I mean, Trump had a Mossad asset on the dais with him yesterday in the form of Mrs. Adelson, who had a better view of things than Joe Biden did from the dais.
Absolutely. And
does one really think he's going to smack Bibi on the hand or give Bibi whatever he wants?
Not give him whatever he wants, but he will evaluate Bibi's scenarios, which is already very complicated. And obviously, this Ziocon matrix in the Beltway, across the Beltway, will be putting a lot of pressure on Trump if push comes to shove. The thing is, the current leadership in Iran, Pezeshkian was basically selected by Khamenei and then by the voters to try to find some sort of reapproximation with the West, and especially with the US. They don't want a war with Israel, and they don't want a war with the US. So this changes the equation a lot, because the Iranians are refusing to be dragged into this trap, falling into the Israeli trap of a war needs to be inevitable. Not at all. So that changes the equation completely, because it's basically Israel spinning one day after another, spinning new reasons to start a war against Iran. But Iran, on the other side, they are doing it's a Sun Tzu strategy in the end. They are just expecting Israel to trip on their own dementia year after year, months after months, week after week.
What are the economic implications, if any, of the pact between Russia and Iran? Do they change any of the BRICS generated relationship between them?
Judge, the number one implication, which is extremely important geoeconomic, is the international north-south transportation corridor, which is one of the great connectivity corridors of the 21st century. It will be a competitor to the Suez Canal. It may even erase the importance of the Suez Canal mid to long term. And it happens to unite three BRICS, essentially, of course, with an extension to Azerbaijan, and this extension to Azerbaijan could link to Turkey as well. Basically, is a multimodal, it's highways, Caspian Sea, trains, etc., from northern Russia all the way to Astrakhan, and then across the Caspian, then across Iran, and then you turn left on the map all the way to Mumbai in India. It's it's a geoeconomic connectivity corridor, extremely important, non-subjected to sanctions, and with 3 BRICS on top, and everybody that it's around, for instance, as Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, even Pakistan, if they mend their fences with India, everybody can profit from it.
Is this the route of which you speak?
Yes, it is, in red. And there is, in the Caspian, you can have a stop in Baku, for instance, in Azerbaijan. There will be many routes in the Caspian, and another one would be crossing the Caspian from Baku to the left to Turkmenbashi in Turkmenistan to the right, and to the ports in Kazakhstan in the northeast.
Is there a pipeline deal in the Caspian Sea?
Guess what? The Gazprom already said, look, if you need to build a pipeline in the Caspian, we'll build it for you to the Iranians. It's the judges, it's the kind of dialogue between them that they are having at the highest level with proposals, from left of, it's something that I heard in Moscow nearly 2 years ago when an Iranian delegation was there, and they were saying, look, the dialogue has been fantastic. The Russians said, whatever you need, we'll build for you. And the Iranians said, whatever you want, just ask. It's at this level. And it goes all the way to the top where Putin and Khamenei, they respect each other. This is extremely important. So when it goes to the presidents, go to the foreign affairs, Ministry of Defense, investment, etc. And they are very important, also geoeconomic. They are working on a secret, relatively secret, let's put it this way, platform, bypassing SWIFT for very serious, sensitive transactions between Russia and Iran, apart from the mechanisms that they are developing inside BRICS, which are all linked to a progressive de-dollarization. For instance, China and Russia nowadays, their trade, 95% is in yuan and rubles. Soon, the trade between Iran and Russia is going to be 95% between reals and rubles. Same thing. And this is happening among the top BRICS all over. It's an interlocking system.
Are they going to be able to avoid the SWIFT banking system, the one controlled by the West in Brussels, the one that stole $300 billion in Russian assets?
In Russia, exactly. That's the idea. That's the idea. Exactly. And they can unify their payment system. The Iranians have their own payment system. The Russians have also their own, SPFS. So they can unite both, and you have a completely separate from the West payment system. And that includes, for instance, I'll give you a simple example. You have your Mir card in Russia. You go to the bazaar in Tehran, and you can pay with your Mir card, which is something, for instance, if you have a Visa or a MasterCard from the West, you cannot do that in Iran. But if you have a Russian card, you can, and vice versa. And also in tourism, tourism is an important aspect of the deal as well. You're going to have many more direct flights from different cities in Russia, different cities in Iran, and all that. So it's really and they call it comprehensive because it's cultural, tourism, investment, geoeconomic, everything.
What happens if Trump, on his own, lifts the sanctions that Biden imposed?
But the America, but this, do you think Congress, Judge, would ever allow it?
Well, I can't imagine Congress defying Trump. On the other hand, the president has the authority to impose and to unimpose. Biden did the sanctions on his own. As far as I know, and as you've told me and others have told me, it actually made Russia stronger.
Yes.
Do they want the sanctions removed?
Yes.
I would think they want people to be able to fly from New York directly to Moscow instead of having to spend a day going through Istanbul.
It's same thing with the Iranians, Judge. This new government, which is compared to the Raisi government, it's let's say 30 to 40% more Atlanticist leaning, not in terms of embracing Atlanticism, but let's try to find a deal with the collective West, with the Europeans. Could be easier with Europeans because they need Iranian energy and they could invest in the Iranian energy market, upgrading it, for instance, and with the US. The US, of course, we know since the Islamic Revolution is going to be extremely hard. But during Kerry and Zarif, who had a very good, even personal relationship, it was possible. And when they struck the deal in Vienna 10 years, almost 10 years ago, in 2015, there were possibilities there of a détente, let's put it this way. And then when the Trump administration, destroyed it all. So it is possible. But it depends on the grip of, as you mentioned, this Zionist matrix on the Trump administration.
Let me switch gears, but going to the Zionist matrix. Should Netanyahu be trusted by Trump?
Definitely not. And I think and all of you in Washington, in the Beltway, know that this is absolutely impossible. One of the things that Trump said yesterday about Gaza was very revealing. He said literally that he's not confident about the ceasefire. And he also said, it's not our war, it's their war.
Let me play that clip for you. Cut number 7.
Confident are you, Mr. President, that you can keep the ceasefire in Gaza and conclude the 3 phases of the deal?
I'm not confident. That's not our war, it's their war, but I'm not confident, but I think they're very weakened on the other side.
Do you support the 2-state?
Gaza, boy, I looked at a picture of Gaza. Gaza is like a massive demolition site. That place it's really got to be rebuilt in a different way.
Do you plan to help rebuilding Gaza?
I might. Gaza is interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, best weather. Everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, well, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
Well, he was kind of all over the place, although hinting perhaps the Trump organization would like to redevelop Gaza. But it is interesting that he said he didn't think the ceasefire would last. Was he talking about Hamas or was he talking about the IDF?
Both. Essentially both. And when he said most people over there are dead, that's not true. Look at the throngs that are coming back to Gaza. Even if there are projections that maybe not 40 something or 50,000 people were dead, 100,000 people there, but Gaza had more than 2 million, and they are coming back and they want to rebuild it by themselves. What he said about the craziest thing, in fact, is that Trump managed to rebrand a genocide into a real state opportunity. This is completely crazy. Only if you lead an empire, you can get away with that. But this is what he's thinking. Let's rebuild it, and in a different way, his own words. So he's already adopted the Israeli position. We're going to level Gaza, and we're going to rebuild it our way. And this is very dangerous because this means that this war is never going to end.
Well, Netanyahu can't afford for the war to end. If the war ends, he could lose his premiership, right?
If the war ends, he goes to jail, Judge. Literally. He needs a forever war, personally. And that's extremely dangerous because it's his interest over the interests of, let's say, a normalized, stable state of Israel. He's not thinking about Israel. He's thinking about himself. And this is what the anti-Netanyahu crowds in Israel are making it very, very clear.
Here's the cynicism of his new U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, cut number 6.
Do you believe that the two-state solution is the future? No, I think we have to recognize there was a Palestinian state. It was called Gaza. Look how that turned out. You can't have a Palestinian state on top of the Israeli state if the Palestinians continue to believe that Israel shouldn't exist. Because the Palestinians don't believe in a two-state solution. They believe in a one-state solution, and their solution, and Israel disappears. That's no solution whatsoever. Israel has a right to its autonomous, indigenous homeland that they've had for 3,500 years since the days of Abraham.
3,500 years?
I mean, I guess he can't count since it started in 1948, but this is part of the Protestant American or American Protestant Christian nationalism.
They know they lying.
Shared by people like the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, who believe that God the Father gave this land to Netanyahu's predecessors, and they have secretly owned it all these centuries and millennia.
Well, if you study the history of Palestine and the history of Gaza, that disproves the theory completely. So what is left is a mythical apocalypsism and a victimhood complex, in fact, in the end. Historically, no value whatsoever. The problem is these people are, once again, now they are around the Trump 2.0 administration. Try to have this conversation in Jordan, in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Syria, in the wider Arab world, in fact, even outside of the ruling classes in the Emirates, for instance. Everybody knows what Palestine is. So, and the facts are there, you know, so.
This is the attitude of the incoming government. It was the attitude of the Biden administration as well. So is there going to be any change in the American view of the Zionist state and their fanaticism? Probably not.
No, definitely. And that's a problem because essentially the Arab world, the spine of the Arab world now is gone. When we look at Jordan, Egypt, Persian Gulf monarchies, etc., and their attitude to the genocide in Gaza. And it's not an accident that spokesman of Hamas, 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, he listed 4 countries that defended Palestine and Gaza from the beginning. And none of these are Arab countries. He mentioned the population of Lebanon. He mentioned Hezbollah and the population of Lebanon. Iran, of course, Iraq. He qualified Iraq as the king of drones, and the Yemenis, Ansarullah in Yemen. These were the defenders of Palestine and the defenders of sovereignty of Palestine. You won't hear any of that from the absolute vassals that are these Arab regimes that owe their existence to the benign American empire, in fact.
Thank you, my dear friend. Always a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to take you back and forth over these various hotspots.
Iran's recent unveiling of a 500-meter-deep underground missile base in the Persian Gulf has sent ripples across the geopolitical landscape. This move comes amidst heightened tensions with the United States and Israel, raising critical questions about regional stability and global security. In this video, we'll explore the strategic significance of Iran's underground bases, their vulnerabilities, and the broader implications for international relations. Footage aired by Iranian state television revealed General Hossein Salami, commander of the Revolutionary Guard, inspecting the underground base. This facility houses radar-evading boats equipped with cruise missiles, capable of long-range attacks and extended naval operations. Salami assured the Iranian nation that their military is ready to defend against any threats, emphasizing the base's strategic importance. Located 500 meters underground, the base offers substantial protection against conventional attacks. However, its depth doesn't make it impervious to modern weapons. Advanced munitions like the US-developed GBU-28 bunker buster or massive ordnance air blast bomb could still pose a significant threat to such facilities. While the depth of 500 meters provides some security, advanced weapons in the arsenals of the United States and Israel could penetrate these fortifications. For example, the GBU-28 and tactical nuclear weapons are capable of causing severe damage to deeply buried facilities. This highlights a key vulnerability in Iran's defense strategy, as adversaries possess technologies specifically designed to neutralize underground structures. Alongside the unveiling of the underground base, Iran initiated a 2-month-long series of military drills to bolster its defense capabilities. These exercises simulate attacks on critical infrastructure, such as the Natanz nuclear facility, and test the nation's air defense systems. The focus is on intercepting ballistic and cruise missiles, as well as drones, in increasingly realistic combat scenarios. The drills also showcase new technologies, such as extended-range drones with enhanced payloads. These drones can bypass traditional defense systems and strike deep into enemy territory, reinforcing Iran's deterrence capabilities. In addition to physical defense measures, Iran is addressing cyber threats, which have become a critical component of modern warfare. The military exercises include simulations of cyber attacks targeting defense systems, highlighting Iran's efforts to safeguard its strategic assets from both physical and virtual threats. Cyber defense capabilities are essential for ensuring that advanced missile systems and drones remain operational during conflict. Iran has developed multiple missile cities along the Persian Gulf coast. These underground bases are designed to enhance the survivability of missile systems and enable rapid deployment during a conflict. The facilities house ground-to-ground missile systems and kamikaze drones, which significantly boost Iran's military firepower. Recent advancements have reduced missile launch preparation times, allowing for quicker responses to emerging threats. In March 2022, the Revolutionary Guard unveiled 2 additional underground bases, emphasizing their capability to launch 60 drones simultaneously with ranges of up to 2,000 kilometers. This demonstrates Iran's ability to conduct extensive offensive operations, even in the face of adversarial threats. The unveiling of these facilities is not just a show of military strength, but a calculated message to Iran's adversaries. As tensions with the United States and Israel escalate, such actions underscore the risk of miscalculation in the region. Any military confrontation involving advanced technologies could have catastrophic consequences, affecting not only the region, but also global security dynamics. Iran's unveiling of its underground missile bases serves a purpose far beyond military defense. These facilities are a direct response to the growing tensions in the Persian Gulf, where Iran faces increasing pressure from adversaries like the United States, Israel, and certain Gulf Cooperation Council nations. The decision to publicize these bases is a deliberate move aimed at signaling Tehran's military readiness to both regional and global players. It's not just about safeguarding its interests, but also about asserting its influence in one of the most geopolitically significant areas in the world. The Persian Gulf, often referred to as the lifeline of global energy, is critical for its strategic shipping lanes and vast reserves of oil and natural gas. Iran's ability to control or influence this region gives it a unique leverage in international affairs. By showcasing its underground missile facilities, Tehran is reinforcing its message that any attempt to threaten its sovereignty or undermine its interests in this region will come with serious consequences. These facilities, hidden deep beneath the surface, symbolize Iran's intent to prepare for long-term challenges, making it clear that it has the infrastructure to sustain its defense, even in the face of advanced technological threats. Additionally, the public display of these bases isn't solely for its adversaries. On the domestic front, it bolsters national morale, projecting an image of strength and resilience. For a country that has endured years of economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, the revelation of such strategic assets highlights its capacity to innovate and adapt despite external pressures. It serves as a unifying narrative for the Iranian people, emphasizing that their nation remains strong and capable of defending its sovereignty against even the most formidable adversaries. On a broader scale, this move also fits within Iran's strategy of deterrence. By revealing glimpses of its military infrastructure and technological advancements, Iran aims to dissuade potential aggressors from initiating conflict. The message is clear. Any attack on Iran could trigger a response with significant regional and global implications. This approach not only helps secure its borders, but also strengthens its negotiating position in the face of ongoing diplomatic and military pressures. In essence, Iran's underground bases are not just fortresses of defense. They are symbols of strategic messaging and power projection. They reflect a calculated effort to shape perceptions, maintain regional influence, and ensure that Tehran's voice remains a crucial factor in any discussion about the Gulf's security dynamics. The construction of underground bases aligns with Iran's broader strategy of expanding its naval capabilities. By fortifying naval assets in concealed locations, Iran aims to counter superior adversaries like the United States Navy. These fortified bases also allow for better integration of naval operations with air and ground forces, ensuring a coordinated response to threats. Iran's fleet of fast attack boats, equipped with radar-evading technology and cruise missiles, plays a central role in its naval strategy. These vessels are designed to challenge larger naval forces, employing swarm tactics to overwhelm adversaries in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf. Iran's underground bases are not limited to housing missiles. They also serve as hubs for its expanding drone arsenal. The integration of advanced unmanned aerial vehicles enhances Iran's ability to conduct reconnaissance and precision strikes. These drones can evade detection and strike targets deep within enemy territory, demonstrating Iran's growing technological sophistication. In recent years, drones have become a cornerstone of Iran's military strategy. With extended ranges and high payload capacities, these drones can target critical infrastructure, such as air bases and naval ships, increasing Iran's strategic leverage in any potential conflict. Iran's underground missile bases represent a significant step in its efforts to counter external pressures and maintain its strategic autonomy. However, these developments also highlight the complexities of modern warfare, where advanced technologies continually challenge traditional defense measures. As tensions persist, the international community must navigate these challenges carefully to prevent a catastrophic escalation in the region. If you found this video insightful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more
Welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Questions, if you have any. But before I do all this, let me start with some housekeeping items. And housekeeping, the first thing on order, I put a survey for you. I don't know, maybe yeah, I'm gonna share it with you guys in its original language. So hold on, just bear with me here. Share screen. And this one has to do with what is not been reported here in the West regarding the demonstrations that took place in Europe. Europe witnessed 30,000 demonstrations. You heard me correct. 30,000 demonstrations in support of Gaza in the last 470 days. Did we hear anything about it in the West? No. So I'm going to share a screen with you here, guys. And you guys I'm going to just scroll quickly here to show you. And what it says right there, that Europe had about 30,000 demonstrations. Look at these ones here from all different countries. As a matter of fact, this list here, guys, it shows how many demonstrations took place in Germany, Spain, Italy, France, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Switzerland, Austria, Greece, Norway, Luxembourg, Poland, Bosnia, Czech Republic, Romania, Portugal, and Malta. Yeah, I was surprised to even see this because I didn't expect it till I read the overseas. This is where I do this is why this channel, guys, the effort and the time and the energy I put into it. So, and without your support, there will be nothing in it. Straightforward. You know me, I don't sugarcoat things, and I don't need to. So, all right, let's get into our analysis here as to what does this strategic partnership agreement between Russia and Iran means, which basically the Russian president and the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, signed the agreement yesterday. So 2 days ago, I'm sorry. It was on Friday and Saturday. So, and I kind of spent those 2 days. I didn't want to rush into this on a weekend because I had to, first of all, confirm some information, check. You know how I do it. There's no need to beat the dead horse, but this is what I'm going to be sharing with you, my own analysis with this. And this leads me to ask the key questions like we always do, because we can move forward without understanding this dynamic. So here's without understanding the key questions. So first question, how significant is this deal? If you notice, I always use the term significance because in geopolitics, every movement has some significant importance, no matter how you look at it. So, like I always say, you see the big picture for that. So, second question, what is the geopolitical, economic, and military impact? Even though, and I'll give you a heads up, even though Russia and Iran did not sign anything specific to military dimensions. And I'm going to give you a comparison to some other treaty Russia signed with other countries to put it in perspective for you. And third question, which is the key, what about the impact on the global energy market? If you only know one of the deals into this agreement pertain to energy. So very, very, very interesting. I had a chance to read a variety of articles from overseas in two, I remember, 2 foreign languages. And one of them I had to translate it from a Russian language because it was written by a very, very key figure, somebody very well known inside the political systems around the world. And it's this guy right here. So, and we'll get into it and as I move forward. So here's the thing. This is what I need you to understand. Like I always say, nothing happens in a vacuum. Why is this important as far as the strategic deal that they signed and the timing of it? Because it happened only about 3 days prior to the inauguration today, which is taking place in Washington. A lot of Americans are not even paying attention to all this because we know, you know how it is. 2 faces of the same coin. We're just changing the players. The game is still the same. That's all it is. I personally don't pay attention to this stuff. But anyway, this deal between Iran and Russia came only 3 days or 2 days about the time of the signature that took place prior to the inauguration. Okay. And also comes in on the heels of a major aspects of the Iranian-European negotiations that took place in Geneva last week. A lot of people do not know that Europe is reaching out to Iran to work out some deals for two main reasons. One is to ensure access to energy, and two, to get back at Donald Trump, because Donald Trump plans on putting tariffs on Europe. You all know where Europe is economically due to their own making. Let's not blame the Americans. The Americans didn't put a gun on them. However, the Europeans were weak enough not to take stand and say to the idiot and outgoing Biden to say no. They couldn't. So you blame the Americans? Of course, to a degree. But, I'm a believer, guys, of when there are problems, you never shift the blame to others before looking inward. Start with yourself first. Like in everyday life, the stuff we do, whatever, we quick to shift the blame because we don't want to take responsibility. Europeans found themselves into this. They dragged themselves into this. The same with the idiot comedian Zelensky, because he could have taken stand back then when a peace offer was given to him. He could have said no to the West. But because he was too weak, so we pressured. The same argument. Nonetheless, you need to understand the dynamics of the Iran-European negotiations last week. And this is why those two main events prior to the inauguration and the signature of the partnership, the comprehensive strategic partnership between Iran and Russia came on the heel of the Iran's negotiations with Europe. So I had a chance to read an article by Ellis Givori, and I'm going to put a link for you guys later on. So now the idea is, what you need to understand about this is nothing new. Of course, there are those who will say, and I agree with you, why they haven't done this before? It doesn't work that way when it comes down to how you move strategically vis-a-vis the shifting of the geopolitical landscape around the world. Except that now Iran and Russia found themselves facing that shift on the global landscape. With the changes in Syria, both of them lost Syria to a degree. In other words, the influence they used to have, it's not there at the moment. Things can be worked out differently. And this is why that idea of the cooperation between Iran and Russia sort of reinforcing the ties between those two countries. And for one reason and one reason only, is to face the geopolitical tensions and pressures that exist around the world. So the deal, the 20-year deal that was signed between the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, it was on Friday, by the way, to be exact. Now, one thing that came important about it was to enhance and support the military and defense cooperation. That doesn't mean that military dimension was neglected. No, it was not. Because here is the key that I need you to know. And I'm not going to go into the entire detail of the agreement. You guys can read it. I'll put the link for you. But I'm going to highlight the aspects that I see very crucial into influencing the geopolitical trajectory. That is the reason why I do the analysis for you. The thing is about this military dimension, it includes a clause in this agreement. And the clause in this specifically stated that neither country, Russia or Iran, would allow their territories to be used for any action that would threaten the safety of the other country. In other words, Russia will not allow its territory to be used that could threaten Iran and vice versa, nor provide any help to any party attacking either country.
See, Putin setting a trap for their ass.
You all know how it is. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The possibilities are there. This is a normal approach. However, for Iran and Russia, they decided to put that clause because this is a long term. That is also an anticipation of the geopolitical changes coming down the pipe. This deal wasn't about a 5-year deal, 10-year deal, 15, it was 20. The same argument I could make about Iran making the agreement, economic one that is, with China for 25 years. You see what I'm getting at? This is the importance of it. So the way I decided to approach this for you guys, I'm going to divide it into 3 dimensions. One is geopolitical, one is economic, and one is military. And then I'll conclude with an excerpt from one of my books, because what's taking place, I addressed this a few years ago as to the possibility of it, and here it is. I'm not surprised at all. So let's start with geopolitical dimension of this particular deal. So now, there are aspects of the geopolitical implications of a strategic importance that will be for both countries, Russia and Iran. And this is exactly when I read the analysis of none other than Alexander Dugin. Now, to those who do not know Alexander Dugin, you need to look him up. He is someone who's been called in the West as the Putin's whisperer. He is the one who whispers to Putin. In other words, Putin listens to this guy. He is a political philosopher. You know, that's not a small matter. He knows what he's talking about. Of course, the West will have to paint this negative image. You know how it is. I don't need to beat the dead horse here. But here is what I found interesting. I'm going to share a clip with you so you guys can take a listen yourself. Of course, they're describing him as the far right and all that stuff. So take a listen, guys.
Supporter of Putin. So I'm transmitting the will of of conservative society, of Russian identity. I'm not formulating this individually.
Alexander Dugin is a Russian political philosopher who's been called the Putin whisperer. He's got Vladimir Putin's ear, and he's really influential in shaping Russian policy at the highest level.
You are known as Putin's Rasputin, and I've even seen Putin's brain. So he has listened to you in the past.
The base of this affirmation is precisely the correspondence between what Putin does and what I always say.
I'm Shahar Baran, and I produce for Leslie Stahl at 60 Minutes. In 2017, we shot an interview with Dugin as part of a story we were reporting about the Russian disinformation campaign after the 2016 presidential elections. We ended up not using the interview. Sometimes that happens when we interview.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there because it's long. You know, that's almost an hour. If you want the link, I'll be happy to put it for you. But I just need you to, I wanted to put a face to a name, first of all, so you know. Should you want to educate yourself about this, go and read up on him and understand. But nonetheless, his analysis was spot on. I read it. I read the translated version of it because I don't speak Russian. And it made sense to me. Again, the way I look at analysis is, does it make sense? And to me, what he argued makes sense to me. So the idea that for Russia and Iran, for them to take these steps moving forward is because they share some strategic interests. And why this interest is shared between the two, this is in response to the major transformation that is taking place, not only in the region, West Asia or Middle East, that is, but around the world. This is one of the things I argued in that video that I did release for you yesterday. And I hope I hope you guys can take a look at it or listen to it, because the analysis reflects this reality. So, and this is what Alexander Dugin sort of expressed in his argument, that Russia now, and I agree with him, it's more closer to Iran than ever before, in a way that they can achieve one of the key aspects that the Russian generals were always hoping for. Do you guys know what that is? Is the access to the Indian Ocean. Now, some might think what this has to do with geopolitics. A lot. Sorry, I showed you the wrong map there. So I don't have the full, but if you look at, you know, where Russia or Soviet Union as it was, this is an old map, by the way. So, and when you look at where Iran is, and when you look at right here, look at the access to the Indian Ocean, because Iran will provide that. The strategic. So this to me, this move is very, very calculated. And I think it was smart of the Russians to go ahead with that agreement. And like I mentioned, both countries share one common thing. Can anybody tell me what it is? Both of them share one common thing. Let me just see. Again, you just think outside the box. This is vis-a-vis a country. They all have one particular thing towards a particular country. Oh, Alice Salokin, common threat called US. You're absolutely correct. That is exactly what it is, because their interest, strategic interests, converge towards some specific for their countries, but also converge over one particular aspect, which has to do with the United States. And this is why, because the US and now with Trump officially, there is expectation that Trump is going to be putting more pressure, maximum pressure on Iran. And why is this important? Because also Iran has lost its geopolitical ally in Syria after the fall of the Assad regime. And same for Russia as well. But for Iran is more so, because now even the Lebanese Hezbollah also has lost that aspects of it. So it becomes very, very dynamics moving forward from a geopolitical aspect. The other aspect has to do with, for Iran itself, geopolitically, it has been described as neither on the east, neither on the west. Or, in other words, it wanted to remain non-aligned. Maybe on the papers, but in reality, it's not. I disagree with some analysts who argue that, Iran is pursuing the policy of non-alignment. I disagree with that, but that's my opinion. So I had a chance to read again another analysis by a Middle East researcher by the name Mohammed Bayat. And this is where some of my disagreements comes in. The other points he talked about was spot on, because the idea that Iran is independent power, it is when it comes down to how it is in West Asia. But again, now Iran is being forced to kind of realign itself with Russia, with China, with BRICS. So that independence might not be there as you and I understand it, or that non-alignment that is. So, however, Iran has always been known for the slogan, neither east, nor west. So this is where that importance of understanding this joint ventures with Russia comes in, because to Iran, it attaches more and more importance to the strategic aspects of its foreign policy, to a degree, that is. So, and this is why this 20-year deal between Iran and Russia, we cannot classify it the same way that I will say Russia deal with North Korea. Because do you guys know about the deal between Russia and North Korea? What do they share in common? One particular thing, that each country will come to the support of the other if attacked. With Iran and Russia, they don't have this as part of this particular strategic agreement. Major difference. Is this a sign for the possibility of a conflict in the Far East, in the neighborhood? There are those who will say the possibility is there. Maybe, maybe not. So now, the one thing I will have to agree, not completely, but to a level, with the analyst, the Middle Eastern researcher Mohammed Bayat, that is that the idea that now the neoconservatives and warmongers in Israel, because all of them includes Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China. They all include those within the block of authoritarian regimes. but within, as the analysts argue, within that framework of formulating the discourse of the new Cold War. I don't subscribe to that. I respectfully disagree with the researchers about reaching this conclusion as to combining those countries into the context of the Cold War. No, because the dynamics of the recent contemporary geopolitical time has changed or is different from that of the Cold War era. Because here is the thing, reality on the ground is different. This is where I see that difference as to the idea of, from a geopolitical perspective. And like I mentioned earlier, the big advantage to all this is that Russia will have access to the Indian Ocean. It's a big dream that always been for the Russians. And this is where I concur with Alexander Dugin, who stresses that the visit by the Iranian president to Russia sort of highlights the advancements of this relationship between the two countries. This is a step forward into ensuring that both parties achieve that strategic interest in light of the changes that's taking place. I couldn't agree more. So, moving on to the military dimension. Like I mentioned, the strategic agreement between Russia and Iran did not delve deeper into or include some unexpected dimensions into the military realm. This is completely the opposite from that the one Russia signed with North Korea, especially since the agreement with Iran does not. This is the key, guys, that I need you to understand. When you look at this agreement between the two, that does not oblige either country to defend the other in the event of an attack, but is limited only to not providing military assistance to the other support to the attacker. Very crucial. There are those, I'm one of those that's saying, yes, this is on a paper. However, should be tensions on the ground, there will be support behind closed doors. It's normal. Look no further now at the Houthis launching their hypersonic missiles into Israel. Look at the Houthis chasing out the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier. How are they going to do this with drones? No. They're doing them with some advanced systems, where the systems came from. Now, that doesn't mean they can manufacture them, but let's be realistic, guys. We're talking about hypersonic missiles here. I spent time in Yemen. I'm very familiar with the level of infrastructure for this kind of stuff. There is none. Let's just be straightforward about it. That doesn't mean they can develop some indigenous type of rockets, whatever. You all know what I mean. So that is where the difference is. Now, here is where I have to think as to this military agreement that is limited. Is this a good thing for the West? Is this a positive sign for the West? And I think the West is relieved. They're not going to disclose this, of course. They are relieved. The West, the EU and the United States and the Britain and all the, the collective West. Let's just put it that. So they are relieved that the military dimension, because they were watching this closely, does not adventure into some sort of way Russia signed its agreement with North Korea. But there is one dimension to this, which means what? Is that if the West, which most likely it will, this is another reason why I want to head out to Asia again. It's because I already got a word as to what the upcoming Secretary of State is intended to do in Asia. As a matter of fact, at the time of this live stream, there is a delegation of Trump team that is already on its way to Australia. Why do you think they're going there for? So, and this is why I'm saying There are those on the West that saying, oh, great, that Russia and Iran did not expand on the military, because in case which tensions gonna emerge into the East, Iran is not obliged, it's not obligated by treaty to go and send its support there. So, however, for the military dimension, you're gonna have to look at it more so for Iran than it is for Russia. Why is this? Because Iran has settled with the Europeans on the positioning of its ballistic missiles in future negotiations with American President Trump. Settled in a way that it do not want to discuss this in detail. And you all know why. Why Iran doesn't want to discuss this with the Europeans. It's because if it does, that's going to give them an idea about the length of the missiles, how far the missiles can go. Then the NATO, or the US, which mainly the US is not NATO, is the US. The US and Israel can adjust their strategies by targeting. This is the reason why, like I always say, as of now, the US or Israel, or Britain for that matter, are unable to attack Iran. They won't be able to. For one reason and one reason only. They do not know how far Iran's ballistic missiles can reach. Yeah, there are those who say, well, Iran just talks, and it doesn't work that way, guys. Iran has to think strategically, But I tell you this, as I argued in my, I think I did this one, not on the Russian book, I did it on the Iran book, that if Iran's nuclear infrastructure is attacked, they're gonna respond. And this is one of the reasons why they never wanted to disclose. So the other dimension that Iran has an advantage of is, should pressure mount on it, that they're going to change their nuclear doctrine. Because any pressure goes that direction, it will activate these mechanisms. And we all know what it means. Iran is in a position to upgrade the production of uranium to the level of weapon grade, which means it can turn it into a nuclear device in no time. As a matter of fact, some say, well, Iran already has, I don't know, what do you guys think? Let me, just yes or no. In your opinion, do you believe Iran is in possession of a nuclear device? Yes or no? All right, let me see. Hong Wong, you say yes. Flat Earth, you say no. Jesus Aguilar, you say no. Taiwan Still, you say yes. Seymour Peria, you say close to. Kevin James, you say yes, Iran has a nuclear weapon. Truth Seeker, you say yes. Hairless Ape, you say no. Yeah, so you can just tell, even here, guys, even within our own community, is divided. Yeah, more so, Marcian Dorcia, you say yes. Enzo, you say no. Yeah, it's if I am to say just figuratively, it's 50-50. It's divided. So, personally, I can confirm, I've been around that part of the world. I've been near, I was up north in Kurdistan, which overlook Iran and so forth. But beside all this, I can't. If something I am not sure 100%, I can't. Now, this is different than two other countries, Israel and North Korea. Now, that I can tell you, they are in possession of nuclear weapons. Simple as that. But even for Israel, it's not what we might think. Israel also just given the fear of having so-called nuclear, because what Israel is going to end up doing the same way Saudi Arabia does. It through a third party, they can acquire that. You all know what I mean by this. Read the line between the lines. As a matter of fact, this is one of the lines that is redacted in my Saudi book. So just get a copy of the book, guys, if you are interested in learning, and you will see what I'm detailing there. So you can get it through Buy Me Coffee. That's where I have the books up. Now, this lack of cooperation, defense cooperation between Russia and Iran, paves the way for the West to reconsider what if. No. But it's different than what it is between Russia and North Korea. So let's move on to the economic aspects. And this is, again, where the bulk of what this treaty is all about, or the military, what the comprehensive strategic agreement is all about. So in addition to the military cooperation, there is an expansion of the economic ties between those two countries. And the major one has to do with Russia's north-south transport corridor. I had a chance to read up, again, some other analysis from different sources, and I was aware of this particular thing. Now, take a look at this. When you look at the map, the line in blue, that is the standard route where Russia's energy will have to go through. See where it's going around and so forth. Now with this pipeline, the gas pipeline between Iran and Russia, which is going to go through Azerbaijan, look how much it cuts the distance. This is the what they call the north-south transport corridor. Very, very strategic. So then there is another dimension, and the dimension is that Iran already joined BRICS. You all know what it means. Saudis back down. Saudis, they're wishy-washy. How can you trust the Saudis or the Emiratis or whatever? You know how Arabs are, or Muslim countries. When I say countries, I'm referring to the leaders, not the people. So, and because for BRICS specifically, when it comes down to Iran, it provides the platform for this collaboration. So, because Iran already eyed this membership and integration into a multipolar economic bloc aligned with its objectives. That is where the key is economically. So this is why this idea of the strategic partnership agreement makes perfect sense. Perfect sense when it comes down to the building of this facility as far as the pipeline. Very, very, very crucial. That is, I even had I remember seeing it. I don't know what it is. Hold on, just bear with me, guys. Yeah, the pipeline in itself. Because despite these difficulties, I had a chance to read an article by, you all remember Dr. Digby James Wren, that I brought him in on the channel. I wrote an article, a great article about this particular aspects of it on his Substack account. And the idea that this building of this natural gas pipeline that is going to connect Russia into Iran, because there will be some challenges to it. One of the challenges that I see is that Azerbaijan can be used or pressured by the US and Israel. I did a video for you about the silent supporter of Israel providing energy, Azerbaijan, and Turkey providing the transport, by the way. But what are we talking about here regarding this transport? Just to put it in perspective for you. So we're talking about, it's going to start with the small volumes of about 2 billion cubic meters. But this is going to reach later on about 55 billion cubic meters of gas per year. This is what Putin stated. So, because oil is also another dimension to all this. Iran is part of OPEC. Russia is part of OPEC Plus. You all know what it means. This is the importance of understanding this dynamic. So the pipeline itself, but again, are we going to be seeing the same sabotage that took place with Nord Stream 2? I won't be surprised, because you're going to have to allocate a lot of funding to ensure the protection of these types of pipelines, unless they are underground, which we all know what it means. So when you look at also the dimensions on the military aspects between Iran and Russia, it put things in perspective for you. So now, The other aspect that you need to understand is the Strait of Hormuz. This is going to play a major role, especially from the side of Iran, should things go different directions. And I give the credit, by the way, to World Atlas for these pictures, because Iran is in a position to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. To those who say it can't, I think things have changed. You will be able to stand by the statements, let's say 20 years ago, not today. I mean, if the Houthis were able to drive out a US aircraft carrier, what do you think the Iranians are capable of doing? Yeah, they might have not responded to Israel the way you might have been expecting, or whatever, but it doesn't work that way. You have to be, when it comes down to those kind of decisions, you have to be strategic. You can't give in to emotions. And we all know humans, we tend to, when we get emotional, we react. No, you can't do that. You can't do that when it comes down to this dimension. Suffice it to understand, at least from an economic perspective, how this is now going to change the dynamics. Because look where it was going. Look at the access to Europe and so forth. Not anymore. It's going to go directly there, which means Europe is going to be holding the end of the stick. Europe is done for, by the way, guys. I had a family visit here during Christmas, and we were talking, or sometimes we'll have a cup of coffee by the fire, sit down in the house, and just chat. And I'll ask some really poignant questions. I know they are not into geopolitics, but they can understand the difference between last year and this year as far as where things are. And it became clear to me, I will be going to Europe at some point soon. And this has nothing to do with the trip that I planned for Asia. Those are two separate things. But to me, Europe is, this is why Europe agreed to have a talk with Iran. Even though we know what Donald Trump might be doing and his hawkish team that's coming, Department of State's already pushing the narrative for a war in Asia against North Korea. Yeah, that's how crazy they are. They are already pushing for more tensions regarding the Taiwan Strait. You know, these hawkish in Department of States are going to be using the likes of South Korea, the likes of Philippines. This is why, guys, I am now turning my attention to a degree to the Philippines because of what's going on inside. And I am hoping to have a chance to talk to some in the government, if they are willing to come over on the platform here, and I'll have some key questions and listen to what they have to say. Because Filipino people deserve better. And the massive corruption that exists in Philippines, not that we don't have it here, we do. Not that Europe doesn't, they do. So, but it's just to highlight to you where things are moving when you put it in perspective when it comes down to the geopolitical chess game. That's my point for you to understand. So when Russia will be thinking in terms of now this deal with Iran will grant it access now to the Indian Ocean, it's a big deal. China was thinking the same back then, and they were able to achieve that. How do you think they achieved that one, you may ask? Look no further than, let me put up a map for you here, and I'll point it for you. Oh, sorry, not this one. It's right here. Look at just the right here in Eritrea and south of Djibouti, and the access to the Red Sea and south all the way to the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. This is China. We're thinking ahead of that. So now Russia is doing the same with Iran. That's what I'm talking about, guys. Strategic aspects of it. Now let me share with you some excerpts from what I wrote I'll be honest, I don't remember which book I wrote that in. But if I am to guess, it will have to be the Russian book. But I'm going to put a picture here for both books that I wrote about each country. So this is what I argued back then. is that equally important, Russia now finds itself at a crossroads, so to speak, when it comes to its economic venture with Iran. Since the US decided to withdraw unilaterally from the Iran nuclear deal reached with major powers, plus Germany, known as P5+1, Russia will have to decide whether to challenge US sanctions by continuing to trade with Iran or support the US sanctions on a limited basis. I believe Russia will want to demonstrate its global role by ensuring that Russia's interests are considered as tensions rise between Iran and the US. If the United States end up wearing with Iran, meaning going into war, I am convinced that Russia and China will support Iran behind the scenes. The US is on dangerous path, to say the least, as a war with Iran will take on wider dimensions involving countries that seek to defend their strategic and economic interests. The other alternative, as I argued, the other alternative is that, the other alternative announced by Trump back then is regime change in Iran. It demonstrates not only the president's ignorance about historical events, and I'm gonna stop right here before I continue to ask you one thing. I am referring in the book, and I put it in paragraphs, 1953. What was I referring to without saying it? Can you guys tell me what was my reference to when I mentioned 1953 vis-a-vis Iran? I'm just gonna wait for your answer. Oh, Zhao Yang, you got it. Which coup are we talking about? They're specific. You got it. Which one? HO channel, Mossadegh overthrow, Jesus Aguilar, CIA coup. It wasn't just the CIA. It was another entity also involved, which is MI6. You got it, Michael Crystal. You got it. So, and that's what I put. Particularly in 1953, the CIA and MI6 orchestrated a coup in support of the Shah. But also the effect regime change will have on the region's political landscape. A policy of regime change in Iran is advocated by the hawkish US, none other than former National Security Advisor John Bolton. But this advocacy will fail now because the regional dynamics have changed from those of the 1950s when Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown in favor of the Shah. As we know, the 1979, I continue, Islamic Revolution in Iran later changed the course of history. There is no telling what the political map of the Middle East may look like after the war, in the aftermath of a war between Iran and the United States. A war with Iran will certainly disrupt the global oil market, as Iran will most likely, like I mentioned earlier, let me put up this picture here for you to see. Yeah, will most likely shut down the Strait of Hormuz, through which 17.8 million barrels of oil cross daily. Russia, a major oil producer, may benefit from such a war as demand for Russia oil and natural gas will increase. So that is what I wanted to share with you, just to put things in perspective for you to understand what this strategic comprehensive agreement means. The comprehensive strategic agreement, not the other way around. So. Excuse me. Just to put it in perspective, because you need to understand where the dynamics are headed. As now that Trump now is in office, you're going to be seeing the hearings in Senate about the nominations and so forth. I am very concerned of the three positions: Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Advisor. They already Waltz, who is the one positioned for the national security, a hawk already pushing against China, pushing against now this TikTok stuff and all that. I'm also concerned about the Secretary of Defense, the guy that is trying to be appointed, who is not qualified. Just because he served in the military doesn't make him qualified. Then I am concerned about the idiot hawkish Rubio, who is like wants two wars, one with Iran, actually three, one with Iran, one with China, and one with North Korea. How crazy and lunatic for those politicians to be thinking in these terms, still thinking in the Cold War mindset. And even the guy is younger than me. He's like still a kid by standard of statesman history. You know, the older generation and so forth. He's still too young to even grasp the depth of the Cold War and understanding those kind of things. So just to be pushing in this narrative just doesn't make any sense. And this is where why I decided to do this for you guys, to lay out the landscape for you to understand the dynamics where they are headed. So this way you will be informed. And of course, a good reason for me to start to think. That's why I made the decision last night regarding my trip to Asia. So speaking of that, I will be detailing till I look at the survey that I put. Make sure, guys, to vote on that question that I put in the community post, because till I see where that's going, I am in a process of starting to put numbers to the papers and the plans and so forth. I don't disclose where I'm going. You all know this by
Sergei Viktorovich, what is happening in the United States now? As I understand it, the inauguration of the newly elected president is scheduled to take place today. Please, dear colleagues. Indeed. The reports of the world media and social networks have been overflowing with information from Washington since yesterday, when Trump and his team arrived in the Capitol for today's inauguration, which is scheduled for 8 p.m. Moscow time. And the details are well known. But in parallel with the preparation for this ceremony, of course, speculation, analytical calculations, and forecasts are growing regarding how this will affect various conflicts in various regions of the world. There are plenty of these conflicts, including in the Middle East, where the situation, despite the signing of an agreement between Israel and Hamas, does not at all convince us that stability has been achieved. Warnings are being heard on the one hand about Israel violating the agreements, and Israel is warning Hamas that they are also not fully implementing what they signed up for. And, of course, apart from the Gaza Strip itself, the Palestinian problem is not going away. We remember how Donald Trump, during his first presidency, promoted a concept that is fundamentally different from the Arab Peace Initiative, which assumes the normalization of relations between Israel and all Arabs, and then between other states. The events in Yemen, Libya, Syria, which took place a month ago, of course, make the Middle East and the Near East a very restless region. We will not forget about Afghanistan, where the Americans are also trying to restore their presence to some extent. They are using neighboring countries for this. They are thinking about returning their military infrastructure there. I am saying all this in relation to the policy that the previous U.S. administration pursued. Therefore, of course, everyone is wondering what the official approaches promoted by the Trump administration will be. Unofficially, many members of his team and he himself have spoken out repeatedly on the Middle East and the Ukrainian crisis, which Trump views as one of the priority areas of his foreign policy activity with an eye to resolving it. They make it clear that they understand some aspects of the Russian position, for example, regarding the unacceptability of Ukraine's membership in the North Atlantic Alliance. But I will repeat once again, all these are rough. Trial and error statements made on the eve of the new president's official inauguration and on the eve of the approval of members of his administration. Therefore, much depends on the United States, primarily due to the fact that the Europeans and Asian allies of the United States, Australia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, are completely guided by the position of the White House. And in this sense, they are waiting to see what this position will be in its final form. And, of course, this is being watched by developing countries and countries in those regions, where the United States can play a positive role. But can also continue the line of the previous administration to maintain conflict in the hope of extracting some benefit from the ongoing crises. At least, this was the line of the United States for many years under various administrations. Therefore, guessing now is a thankless task. We are open to contacts. Having repeatedly answered relevant questions, we have confirmed this with the understanding that we will wait for serious proposals from those of our colleagues who at one time froze or broke off relations with the Russian Federation. You mentioned the Middle East. Now, indeed, an exchange has taken place there, and some of the hostages have been released. But among the remaining hostages, there is another person with dual citizenship, with Russian citizenship. I would like to ask you, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other colleagues through other departments, to work on this issue, not to forget about it, and to do everything to ensure that our citizen is released. We are working on it. As for the events in the United States, today in Washington, Donald Trump is being inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. Obviously, the pre-election period was difficult for Mr. Trump in every respect. He and even his family members were constantly under severe pressure, and it came to attempts on his life. But he showed courage. He won a convincing victory in the elections. And we see statements by the newly elected President of the United States and members of his team about the desire to restore direct contacts with Russia, interrupted through no fault of ours by the outgoing administration. We also hear his statements about the need to do everything to prevent World War III. Of course, we welcome this attitude, and we congratulate the elected President of the United States of America on taking office. I would like to emphasize that we have never refused dialogue. We have always been ready to maintain smooth and cooperative relations with any American administration. I have already said this many times. We proceed from the fact that our dialogue will be built on an equal and mutually respectful basis, taking into account the significant role that our countries play on a number of key issues on the global agenda, including strengthening strategic stability and security. We are also open to dialogue with the new United States administration on the Ukrainian conflict. The most important thing here is to eliminate the root causes of the crisis, which we have spoken about many times. This is the most important thing. As for the settlement of the situation itself, I would like to emphasize once again, the goal of the settlement should not be a temporary truce, not some kind of respite for regrouping forces and rearmament with the aim of subsequently continuing the conflict, but a long-term peace based on respect for the legitimate interests of all people, all nations living in this region. But, of course, we will fight for the interests of Russia, for the interests of the Russian people. This, in fact, is the goal and meaning of conducting a special military operation.
Of January, and this is my second video update of the day. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Vladimir Putin's message to Donald Trump just hours after his inauguration, and we're going to try to make sense of what this means for the conflict in Ukraine, and more importantly, for a possible ending of this conflict. But that's not all we're going to take a look at. Of course, we're not going to leave out the green t-shirt. We wouldn't want him to feel forgotten, because what he's doing in Ukraine is deserving of all of our attention. But let's begin with Vladimir Putin. Putin congratulates Trump and says he's ready for dialogue. And this is what Vladimir Putin said during a meeting of Russia Security Council. Quote, Moscow congratulates Trump on assuming office. Moscow is open to dialogue with the new US administration on the Ukrainian conflict. Russia assumes that dialogue with the US will be built on an equal and mutually respectful basis. What Vladimir Putin is saying is not rocket science. He has been saying those exact things over the last 3 years. He was open to negotiations even with the Biden administration, as long as those negotiations were to be conducted on a mutual respect basis. However, we know from experience that there's very little things that the Biden administration ever respected, the least of all Russia or Vladimir Putin. But let's take a look at the next statements. Putin also claims that Russia has never refused dialogue with any US administration. That is not a claim. That's a fact. There hasn't been a single solitary day over the last 3 years when Vladimir Putin refused to engage with the West. If I remember correctly, if my memory serves me right, I think it was the West who has broke all contact with Russia. They've cut all diplomatic ties. They've imposed the 15 to then 25,000 sanctions upon Russia. And that every single step, they said, the time for negotiations is not now because Ukraine is not in a strong enough position. And then they're blaming Vladimir Putin for not wanting to end the war. By the way, have you noticed that when the green t-shirt talks about the Russian missile strikes and all of that, he says, well, this is proof that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to stop. They're all framing it very childishly, but they're framing it as if Vladimir Putin is the one who refused to talk. But Vladimir Putin doesn't have anyone to talk to because these people, they've removed themselves from any position of diplomacy where dialogue is actually invited. But let's take a look at the last statement because, those were the polite things that Vladimir Putin said. And now we're getting to the not so polite things. At the same time, Putin emphasized that the Russian authorities will continue to fight for the interests of their people. This is Vladimir Putin's way of saying, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, but we'll do it nonetheless. This conflict, at the end of the day, is not good for Russia, is certainly not good for Ukraine, and it doesn't do any good to the West either. There is not a single party who will win it all in this conflict. Russia will win this conflict. They've already won. However, this win comes at a high cost. There's been a lot of lives lost. There's been a lot of diplomacy lost. There's been a lot of the economy lost in that. For Ukraine, it's much, much worse because everything that Russia lost, when you talk about Ukraine, you can do it times 100. That's the result for Ukraine. And for the collective West, well, they've been exposed on the international stage. There's a lot of money lost for the West. There's a lot of political capital lost for the collective West. This is why it's best for this conflict to end as soon as possible, because there's not a single party who will rejoice at the end of it. Yes, as I stated, Russia has won this conflict, but that comes at a cost, which is why Vladimir Putin wants this to end as soon as possible. But he's not going to let that get in the way of actually doing the job until the very end. That's what he's signaling over there. Now, let's move on to the next article, because here is where he elaborates a little bit more. Putin said about readiness for talks with US on condition of Ukraine's complete surrender, says ISW. Putin reportedly called a meeting of Russian Security Council on the 20th of January where he and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov confirmed Russia's readiness for peace talks with the new administration of US President Donald Trump. Putin stressed that any peaceful settlement should be based on eliminating the root causes of the conflict, which, in his words, includes meeting Russia's tough demands. These people at ISW and a lot of people in the world are still shocked by the fact that Vladimir Putin asks for Ukraine's capitulation. But let's look at the situation realistically. There is no victory to be had for the green t-shirt in this conflict. It simply isn't. So what Vladimir Putin is saying is, look, we can all see where this is going. Why don't we just get straight to the point rather than going through all of these motions? Because we're going to get there eventually, but in the meantime, we're only going to damage ourselves even more. We're going to damage Russia, we're going to damage Ukraine, and we're going to damage the collective West. But the result, in the end, will still be the same. Now let's look at this quote. Quote, senior Kremlin officials, including Putin and Lavrov, have been reiterating in recent weeks that the Kremlin refuses to consider any compromises to Putin's late 2021 and early 2022 demands, which include demands that Ukraine remain permanently neutral and not join NATO, impose severe limitations on the size of the Ukrainian military, and remove the current Ukrainian government. Yes, indeed, Vladimir Putin has remained very consistent with regards to his demands, and I'm glad that even ISW recognizes that what Russia demands today is exactly what they demanded in 2021. However, there's also a little bit of propaganda and a little bit of lying in there. They're saying that Vladimir Putin demanded the removal of the Ukrainian government, and they're making it sound as if that's what he demanded in 2021 or 2022. But that's not true. It's simply not true. Vladimir Putin at the time didn't care about the Ukrainian government. What he wanted was for Ukraine to remain neutral and to limit the size of its army. That was it. He couldn't care less at the time about the Ukrainian government. When he started to care about the Ukrainian government was when the green t-shirt signed the decree through which he prohibited any sort of negotiations with Russia and then just escalated from there. That's when Vladimir Putin started to pay attention to the green t-shirt government. Up to that point, the removal of the Ukrainian government has not been in the attention of Vladimir Putin. But of course, ISW, they have to clump it all together just to hide the lies and the propaganda that they've been spewing out for the last 3 years. And this is how they do it. They try to take some truths, combine it with some of the lies, and then just sell it to the people, hoping that people wouldn't realize what they're doing. But we do realize that's what we are here, you and I. Putin also said that the then US President Joe Biden proposed in 2021 to postpone Ukraine's accession to NATO for 10 to 15 years, but even this did not prevent a Russian invasion, which he said was alleged threats from NATO expansion. Of course, why would Vladimir Putin agree to a 10 to 15 years postponement of Ukraine joining NATO? Because it was obvious where this was going. They just wanted to wait Vladimir Putin out. Just wait until he's no longer there, and then hopefully they're going to get another Boris Yeltsin somehow and get the deal done, which is not in the interest of the Russian Federation. Vladimir Putin is mature enough to recognize this, which is why he said absolutely not. This needs to be settled once and for all. There's not going to be a postponement. There's not going to be a delay, not 10, not 50, not 500 years. This needs to be permanent. And of course, these people in NATO and in the European Union, they absolutely refused, which is why we have this unfortunate situation today. Now, we've talked about Vladimir Putin, but let's divert the attention to the green t-shirt, because, you know, I've covered in an episode his interview with Lex Fridman. So let's see what Lex Fridman said about that interview in retrospect. American podcaster Friedman sees no desire for negotiations from Zelensky and plans to interview Putin. Quote, I gave President Zelensky every single chance to signal willingness to negotiate, knowing that both Trump and Putin will listen to this conversation. I don't think he took it, and instead chose to speak very crude words towards Vladimir Putin. This is fully understandable, but not directly productive to negotiation. It's refreshing to see that there are still people who can see the green t-shirt exactly for who he is, and more importantly, for what he wants. And what he doesn't want is negotiations. That's not on his wish list. However, Lex Fridman has faced a lot of criticism for the way he's conducted that interview. Now, like I said, I've had the displeasure of watching the green t-shirt throughout the entire duration of the interview, and Lex Fridman has challenged him in places quite a bit at times, and he's faced some criticism. Listen to this. Friedman noted that he has faced significant criticism regarding his interview with Zelensky, but disagrees with it. He insists he was well prepared for the interview and is not naive about Putin. Basically, that criticism was directed at Lex Fridman for the fact that he insisted on a peace deal. Some people, some experts said, well, how did Lex Fridman dare to ask Zelensky to negotiate with Putin? Doesn't he know that Putin is a madman? That's basically the basis of the criticism, which is why Lex Fridman said, look, I've read countless documents. I was spending 8 hours a day for a month preparing for this interview. I know exactly who Vladimir Putin is, and I know exactly who Zelensky is. So please don't lecture me on who one is and what another isn't. Now, speaking of the green t-shirt, let's see what he's doing in Ukraine. Journalists find luxurious estate of Supreme Court Judge Zhukov. The family of Serhiy Zhukov, a judge on Ukraine's Supreme Court, lives in an expensive house on a 4-hectare property just outside Kiev, investigative journalist at Bihus.info reported on January the 20th. The premises include lakes and vineyards. Expensive house, lakes, vineyards. That sounds like our kind of place, my friends. That's where you and I should be. Now, in all seriousness, for those of you who don't know, I am a big fan of fishing. I could go on a fishing expedition for about 7,000 years and I wouldn't get bored one single day out of the 7,000 years. That's how much I love fishing. So when I read this this part of the article from the New Voice of Ukraine, I thought, wow, that sounds like the good life there. You have the lake, you have the vineyard, maybe a little bit of sweet white wine, you know. What can you ask more? You know, Mr. Judge Zhukov, he's living life, isn't he? This is where all of that money that the West keeps pumping into Ukraine is really going. That's what it's really funding. And not just. Let's look at another 2 titles. State Bureau of Investigation and Security Service of Ukraine detain former commander of the 155th Mechanized Brigade. The investigation suggests that the commander did not respond to offenses in his units, including his men's absence from the armed forces without permission. Basically, his own men were paying him to say that they were at the front, but in reality, they were not. I mean, they're saying it in the article. I'll leave the link below, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because this is what this is all about. Basically, these commanders, and here's just one example, these commanders were taking bribes from their men to say that they're at the front lines, but in reality, they were very, very far away. Let's look at the next title. Case of Russia's advance in Kharkiv Oblast in 2024. 2 generals and colonel detained. Officials from the State Bureau of Investigation, in cooperation with the Security Service of Ukraine, have detained 2 former generals and a colonel on suspicion of negligence that enabled Russian forces to seize part of the territory of Kharkiv Oblast in May of 2024. This is another article that has to do with money, with negligence, with a little bit of someone getting paid. This is the democracy. This is the freedom that the green t-shirt is fighting for. And when people said this, and they've been saying it for a long time, most of those people have been called by the sanctimonious people in Brussels, Russian propagandist, Putin apologist. However, now it seems to be a crackdown in Ukraine on these topics. However, don't imagine that this crackdown is happening because somehow, suddenly, the green t-shirt has seen democracy. Oh, no. The reason he's cracking down on these facts is purely because he needs more men to the front lines. And he's looking at the holes through which some of these men are actually escaping and wants to plug those holes. It's very simple. But my friends, I'll leave the episode here. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. I wish you a fantastic rest of the evening. Thank you all so much.
agreement and in order to keep him in office as the prime minister. Are those fears legitimate?
Of course they are, Judge. I would be surprised if there weren't those fears. It's almost certain to happen, given the record of the last several months since October 7th of last year, or October 7th of the year before. So yeah, a lot is at stake. The construction of this agreement is so interesting that it's easily manipulated, and I would be shocked if Netanyahu doesn't put the kibosh on it one way or another.
I wonder if when soon-to-be President Donald Trump famously or infamously said a few weeks ago, if the hostages are not released, they'll be hell to pay, he was speaking to Israel.
Well, I believe he was, and that's the $64 question. If Netanyahu acts as I expect he will, not right away, but within a month, 2 months or so, then the question would be, how will Trump react to this? Will he react with a knee-jerk pledge of solidarity to Netanyahu? I don't know. We know what the previous president would have done and did do. I don't know about President Trump, and neither does Netanyahu. So maybe there's some saving grace on there. Maybe there's some kind of break on how badly Netanyahu will violate this agreement, but sure as hell he's going to do that.
Yeah. I wonder if it's a ceasefire or just an inauguration pause.
Well, Trump had a lot to do with this. He has claimed credit for it, and credit surely goes to him largely. I guess McGurk and the others working for Biden did facilitate the talks in a way, but nothing would have happened without Trump intervening. So the question is, how strongly Trump feels about Netanyahu leading our country down the primrose path, as he has been doing for at least the last year and a half. We'll see. That's the thing that Netanyahu first and foremost has to contend with. So there's a degree of uncertainty, but knowing Netanyahu, he'll test the waters and see what happens. They always prefer, that is, the Israelis, to ask for forgiveness rather than permission before they do these things.
I don't know how well that will work with Donald Trump. There's no question about his loyalty to Israel, but I don't think he has a level of personal loyalty to Netanyahu. This spat about whether or not the prime minister and his wife Sarah were invited to the inauguration, which is not a big deal here, has apparently humiliated him in the Israeli press, and it turns out that he was not invited. Even though he said he was going to go, then I think somebody said to him, "Hey, Bibi, you weren't invited. Don't show up. You won't get in."
And of course, there was that X message that Trump's X machine there reposted for everyone to see, calling repeating the words of Jeff Sachs, saying that Netanyahu was an SOB.
Right.
I will refrain from commenting on that, but not only is it true, but the big deal, of course, is that Trump has not denied that his little fingers, or those that were under his orders, retweeted that, and that's a big deal.
You know what Jeff said before he said SOB? Pardon me. A little cold. I actually feel better than I sound. What Jeff said before he said SOB was to catalog the Middle Eastern wars into which Netanyahu personally has dragged the American government. I believe that that's what animated Trump. And that's the message Trump wanted to get out there. Hey, Bibi, I know what you've done. Don't think you're going to get away with this with me.
Yeah, and Jeff was careful to include Iraq. And that's big. because of all the reasons why the U.S. did this act of aggression, a war of aggression against Iraq. The biggest factor, as history has shown now, has been Netanyahu and the Israeli intervention here with the Pentagon and the others, pretty much stacking the deck so that Bush and Cheney and the neocons of that day could prevail and attack Iraq and occupy it. And you know the results of all that.
Is the ceasefire a defeat for Israel, or is it a defeat, maybe temporary, for Netanyahu?
Well, I think it's too early to say, really. We'll see what Netanyahu and the Israelis do. Apparently, Smotrich is hanging in there, so Netanyahu is still going to have a government for a while. I just don't know how to look at it right now. Certainly, it was forced upon Netanyahu, and that's certainly not a victory for him. But, you know, he's a pretty clever guy. He's going to maneuver, and it all depends on whether this real estate fellow from New York, who's now our president, is up to him and able to outmaneuver Netanyahu, which is quite a task, if you ask me.
Do you think that Israel and Iran are each preparing for war with each other, even as we speak?
I think we can breathe more easy now, Judge. You'll recall last week, or maybe it was 10 days ago, when I repeated the National Intelligence estimate of 2007, saying that Iran had stopped working on a nuclear weapon in 2003. And every estimate since then, yearly, had reiterated that judgment. Well, none other than Bill Burns repeated verbatim what I had said to you and others just a couple of days later. So the intelligence community is sticking firm on this one. It's quite a wonderment, okay? So what am I saying here? That plus this new treaty, Iran and Russia. Russia's not going to conclude a treaty with Iran unless it has a commitment for Iran not to develop nuclear weapons. Doesn't need to now. It's got hypersonic weapons. And I think that's also a factor in the way, in the reality that we can breathe easier now. Blinken and Sullivan are gone. Netanyahu has to be more careful. And the Russians are in the mix in a bigger way than they were before.
Well, the fact that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon is not enough to deter Prime Minister Netanyahu from claiming they have a nuclear weapon and using that as an instrument to drag the U.S. into war. I mean, this is right out of George Orwell's playbook. You need that enemy out there. You need that foreign enemy in order to unite people behind you, whether it's real or fanciful. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree completely, Judge, but he's been doing this for years. He did it at the UN with these little diagrams and so forth. They're just at the edge. And even Blinken 2 weeks ago said, you know, okay, yeah, they're enriching to the fairly well, but we still haven't seen them working on a nuclear weapon, but they could get one, you know, even Blinken. So we have Blinken and Bill Burns. Those are the new elements. I had wondered whether that judgment, that key judgment during Bush and Cheney that prevented them from going to war with Iran right before they left in 2008, the estimate was in November 2007. Even Bush in his memoir said that deprived me of the military option. For how could I authorize a strike on the nuclear facilities of a country where the intelligence community says that there is no nuclear weapons program? Bummer. He didn't say bummer, but he wrote that in his book. You have to read these things. His memoir says precisely that. That's a quote.
Well, I don't think this will deter Netanyahu from attempting to whip up a frenzy in the U.S. using his donor class of people and the more than half of the Congress whom the donor class has influenced by their donations to push in that direction. Switching gears Does the CIA, when it spies in the United States, contrary to its charter and to federal laws, give a damn about the Constitution?
The question is who the director is and whether he feels that he has to follow the president's instructions. Now, the legislation provides that the director of national intelligence now, but the CIA director as well, shall perform such other functions and duties as the president shall from time to time direct. That's a direct quote.
Right.
Now, if the president says do this, as apparently Biden told Sullivan to tell the CIA, that's usually how it works. The national security advisor tells the head of the CIA, blow up that Nord Stream pipeline, then he salutes and he does it. He doesn't care whether it's legal or illegal. He doesn't care what he's protected by what he thinks is this provision in this law that's part of the legal basis now. So surveilling Americans, well, they're in these fusion centers now with the FBI. So there's no real break on what the CIA and the FBI can do together. You have the Homeland Security folks in the mix now. It's a real jungle. They don't pay much attention to the law. The Fourth Amendment is out the window, as you wrote very briefly, very recently, and a really good roundup. I'd add one thing to your wrap up, because I remember when we talk about Tulsi Gabbard changing her mind. Well, I remember in 2007 when Obama was running for president. Now, he was really, really strong in the spring of 2007. I'm going to hold those giant telecom companies that give all those phone records to the government. I'm going to hold them accountable. In June of 2007, John Brennan joins Obama's advisory council, so to speak. All of a sudden, Obama says, I changed my mind. I think it's okay. I'm not going to hold those giant telecoms accountable for violating nilly-willy the Fourth Amendment. I remember on the 4th of July, I wrote a stinging little piece saying, look, Obama, you can't fool us, okay? You say, okay, you want to vote for, what was it, McCain in those days? Okay, right. Forget about it. Well, this is insulting. You can't do this. And I said, for this intelligence officer, that's it for my support. So there's precedent for this, and it's really an awful precedent. And I'm really sorry to see a Tulsi Gabbard now. I said, oh, yeah, well, I used to oppose Section 703, but I want to get nominated. I want to get approved. I want to get confirmed.
Well, the section that she opposed, and she opposed it
vocally
and vocally on the floor of the House of Representatives, was the section that, without getting too much into the weeds and how it happened and the history of it, you want to see the history of it, I've written about this extensively, is the section that allows warrantless spying on Americans in direct contravention to the Fourth Amendment, which requires search warrants. The CIA doesn't get search warrants. The NSA doesn't get search warrants. FISA is a facade. The only time anybody uses FISA is if they think that it's going to produce evidence of a crime, and there's got to be some sort of a justification for or a legal judicial basis to acquire the evidence. Well, we understand
yes.
that.
Judge,
she opposed the use of 702. And then 2 weeks ago, when confronted with certain Republican senators threatening to hold up or vote against her nomination, changed her mind, and it infuriated me. Libertarians and those of us who believe that the Constitution means what it says were overjoyed, even though she's an ardent Zionist, when she was announced. Now, forget about it. She's just like everybody else. This is the section of the law that the FBI used to spy on Mr. Donald Trump in 2015 and 2016, and President Trump in his first term in office, and now she's in favor of it.
Right. And Judge, to your credit, you put it in the context of our of our Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, and of what the British were doing to us under general warrants. And
Right.
so the Fourth Amendment, part of the Bill of Rights, says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause, supported by warrants or by oath or affirmation, and particularly defining the places to be searched and the people or things to be seized, period. And quote, it's my favorite amendment. That's why I've tried to commit it to memory. And it's so damn important, so basic. So you're infuriated? Me too. And this is the second time when a person of high stature that I thought was pretty good on these things, namely Obama, now Tulsi Gabbard. Well, infuriation is required and due and actually required in these circumstances.
You know, it's the most specific, precise language in the Constitution. It's there for a reason, to assure that what the British did to the American colonists, like general warrants, would never happen here. A general warrant is not based on probable cause of crime. It doesn't specify the thing to be the place to be searched or the thing to be seized. It just tells the bearer of the warrant, search wherever you want, seize whatever you find. It drove the colonists crazy. It was arguably the last straw that triggered the revolution. And now we're back to it. Well, we've been back to it for since the Bush administration, but now we're to it openly and notoriously back to it.
Yeah, just a little footnote here, which you know better than I, but after drafting most of the Constitution, George Mason, my fellow Virginian, he went to James Madison, who co-drafted it, and he said, Jim, I can't sign this thing. Jim said, come on, you drafted most of it. He said, no, I can't sign this thing because it has no Bill of Rights.
Correct.
Madison said, I promise you, George, if you just keep your mouth shut about this, to get this passed, I will send horsemen up and down the eastern seaboard. We'll get that Bill of Rights ratified. I promise.
Well,
those states,
five states. Here's a telling fact about the ability to leave the Union peacefully. 5 states threatened to leave if a Bill of Rights were not enacted. The other states took that threat so seriously. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, passed in about 3 or 4 months' time. Let's see, if joining the Union was irrevocable by the time Lincoln decided to kill fellow Americans, but yet the people that put the Union together believed you could leave. All right, crazy world that we live in. Larry Johnson ranting and raving this morning, and I agree with him when I asked him what I asked you. Why are the people released by Hamas called hostages, but the people released by the Israelis called prisoners? Because the Israelis and their acolytes in the Western press control the narrative. That's why.
Exactly right.
Pleasure, Ray. Thank you very much. Sorry for my froggy voice. We'll see you again.
Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First,
it's funny, man. It's hilarious. So Kamala and Joe have to sit there. They had to sit there while While Trump said, hey, we're going to go back to common sense. Okay? These two dumb motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? Look at these two dummies. Yes, that's bad. That's why Obama left early. That's embarrassing, man. We need to go back to common sense. We're going to go back to when people wore deodorant in the White House.
I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
Hey, you know something, man? I don't understand why you don't clap for that. Like, yeah, I get it. Kamala and Joe, the Democrats, they want to replace the blacks. I get it. Kamala's not really black. You know what I'm saying? So she's like, hey, bring the Latinos in. I get along with them better. They're less judgmental. They're nicer to me on X. So I get that part, why you wouldn't clap for deportations or repatriations. But why would you hold applause on ruling the cartels the enemy of the country? I thought we all didn't like the cartels. You know what I'm saying? I thought we were all against cartels in America, right? What is partisan, about getting rid of criminal cartel organizations on our own land here domestically? Like, how could you not be for that? Oh, that's right. Nothing that's done in Washington is about us at all. It's about their little system of bullshit-ass politics. There are people, good people, who are captive to a dumb organization called the Democratic Party. If you could pull your head out your ass and out Joe Biden's ass long enough, you'd see the folly of your ways. I'm not saying go stick your head up Trump's ass. I'm not saying that. I'm saying be ass free. Look at everything from a perspective of, is this better for the people or not? I would have to say it's better if we don't have drug cartels, Mexican drug cartels in America. I know that's crazy, right? Call me wacky. But that's how far gone we are. We can't even all agree that Mexican drug cartels are bad.
And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief.
Hold on, man. How could you not clap for that? How could they not clap for that? Once again, here goes another no-brainer situation. Why would you not clap for that. Donald Trump said he's going to get rid of these gangs. These Venezuelan gangs that we've been seeing in Ohio and other places, they're not supposed to be here as Venezuelan gangs. You don't want them to leave America? See what I'm saying, people? See, if that was Venezuelan gangs downtown or down at the if they were at Martha's Vineyard, if Venezuelan gangs were going to the Ruth Chris down at the National Harbor, if Venezuelan gangs were showing up in swanky areas of Massachusetts, where Elizabeth Warren's people are, like if Venezuelan gangs was just kicking it in the Palisades, if it hadn't burnt down, that is. Pick another place. UC Berkeley. There's a lot of liberals at UC Berkeley. If the Venezuelan gangs were roaming the streets of San Francisco, maybe they are, I don't know. All I'm trying to say, man, is these people don't give a damn about what other people go through. They can't even clap to get rid of Venezuelan gangs, to get rid of gangs with AKs. Like, you don't want that to go. I just don't understand what kind of people we got, man. And worse than that, they may be horrible people that won't support it. How could you support a party that's fine with gang activity from other countries as if we don't have enough of our own? Now, I looked up this Alien Enemies Act of 1798. I looked it up because I never heard of it. Eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs in criminal networks. And I said, hey, can he do this? I don't know if he can get this done. Not using that particular statute because that's for countries that we've declared war against. And we haven't declared war against any country that I'm aware of except Russia. You know, by proxy. But hey, whatever he's got to do to get it done, I support getting it done. I would like the Venezuelan gangs to go home, please. But then again, I'm not a hypocrite, right? Maybe that's why you lost. Because your party is such full of shit. You can't even apply getting rid of the Venezuelan gangs off American streets and out of American apartment buildings so we don't have to deal with that garbage. They deserve to lose, man.
If I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before.
This is just too funny. CBS News asks, as Biden exits, how will he be remembered for his handling of the U.S. economy? Really? Let me try to answer that because we just got multiple data points that show some very scary economic news that will hit American banks and consumers very hard in the next few months. Biden isn't just leaving office. He's handing Trump an economic time bomb, and the timer is already ticking. And this isn't hyperbole. It's reality. We're just months away from seeing this explode. Now, if you have money in a bank, like a local bank, you're going to want to pay attention to this. But before we get to the economy, we've been asking for a year or more on this show, who's actually running the White House? Who's in charge? Well, now we know. The CIA is. Speaker Mike Johnson just admitted this weekend a bombshell about his meetings with Biden.
In some ways, I actually kind of feel sorry for Joe Biden. I mean, he's in the twilight years of his life. He is not, obviously has not been in charge for some time. They finally relented. They invited me to the White House. I show up and I realize it's actually an ambush because it's not just me and the president. It's also Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem, you know, the CIA director, everybody. And then, so I walked in the Oval and, I know what this is. The president reaches over just like right next to the fireplace in the Oval and he grabs my arm and he says, the speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone? And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, oh, no, he did it. So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office. And I said, Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard, and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, and he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, oh, you talk about natural gas. Yes, sir. He said, no, you misunderstand. He said, what I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, you're not, sir. You paused it. He was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed.
So yeah, the deep state, the CIA, putting pieces of paper in front of the president, telling him it's one thing, he's signing, and he's actually signing something totally different, running America into the ground. So back to the economy that they've ruined. Let's start with inflation, okay? Because this is where the liberal media is running cover like you wouldn't believe. Here's the liberal magazine, The Economist, this weekend. Joe Biden wound up serving up Donald Trump, meaning Biden paved the way for an economic boom. Here's another one from Time Magazine. Don't give Trump credit for the success of the Biden economy. Okay, right. Don't worry, but I'm sure you'll blame him when this economic bomb goes off in the next 8 to 10 months. So on inflation, every headline out there wants to convince you that inflation is cooling or easing. But what does that actually mean for your wallet? It means prices are still going up, just at a slightly slower pace. Then they're acting like that's some kind of a win. Economist Peter Schiff nailed it when he said this: inflation is not going down, it's going up.
I mean, I don't know how they could be spinning this bad inflation report as good news. Yes, the core number was 1/10 cooler than expected, but the headline number was 1/10 hotter. Inflation is headed much, much higher. The markets have totally got this wrong.
Meanwhile, grocery prices are still climbing. Rent is going through the roof. Energy bills are crushing American families. Does that sound like inflation is cooling to you? Even the Financial Times admitted that wages aren't keeping pace with the cost of living. But the mainstream media buries that part of the story. But some people get it, like Trump's Treasury nominee, Scott Benson. He says Biden intentionally screwed up the U.S. economy and the deficit.
Because I will tell you, I am very concerned about what is happening right now. We have never had a budget deficit like this. We are at 7% of GDP in terms of the deficit. We've never had this when it's not a recession, not a war. And what do we have to show for it? We have they have created 18,000 manufacturing jobs. Last year, the economy only created 250,000 private sector jobs. This is a takeover of the government, of the private sector.
He's absolutely right. And of course, we can't do anything with this mounting national debt. The media won't talk about it, the national debt. Under Biden, we've blown past 100% of GDP, the highest level since World War II. That means we're spending more than we're making as a nation. And the interest payments alone are becoming unsustainable. But we might finally get a Treasury Secretary that isn't dumb as a bag of rocks and understands that our government will collapse unless we stop spending. During his confirmation hearing, Trump's Treasury pick warned Congress this week about all of this spending.
We do not have a revenue problem in the United States of America. We have a spending problem.
But of course, instead of listening to experts, what do we get? More spending bills, more pork barrel projects, more empty promises. This isn't just irresponsible, it's downright dangerous for future generations. Benson also dropped an incredible idea, building a sovereign wealth fund where America invests in itself. Just so you understand how big a deal this is. This is exactly, by the way, what Norway does. You know, those Scandinavian countries that liberals love to talk about?
You can hear the Republican attack ad right now. He wants America to look more like Scandinavia.
That's right. That's right.
Norway uses its incredible wealth they get from oil production. They invest that money in American companies like Apple and Microsoft as part of a sovereign wealth fund. So Scandinavia invests in America, sees amazing growth as a result. And we don't even do that. We print money and then we send it to Ukraine. How backwards? Next, let's talk about the biggest bombshell of all, the bank failures that are looming, okay? The Biden bombshell of all bombshells is about to hit. I spoke with Trends forecaster Gerald Celente this week, and what he revealed should have every America concerned. Celente told me that this year we could see hundreds of banks fail in the United States. Why? Because of the empty office spaces littering major cities across the country. Over 40% vacancy rates for office buildings in American cities. Turns out that when Biden handed out free checks to everyone, told people to stay home, it had devastating consequences for our economy. Commercial real estate is on life support right now. Zelensky described this as a ticking time bomb for the banking industry. Listen.
Your office vacancy rate, depending on the numbers you're looking at in the largest cities, are around 20% vacant. Now these leases are up. People aren't going to be taking back the spaces that they had. Going back, there's going to be an office building bust that nobody's talking about. And it's going to bring down the banks. You're looking at over $2 trillion worth of commercial real estate loans coming due. There's going to be defaults on them. Let's go back to 2023. Remember Signature Bank, First Republic, and Silicon Conman Valley Bank went bust? Look what happened to the equity markets and gold prices. Equity markets were collapsing, gold prices. That was 3 banks. You got hundreds of banks that are going to see defaults on these loans. No one is talking about it.
So this time bomb will detonate just as Trump's first year unfolds. Where's the Mockingbird mainstream media on this story? Silent as usual, of course. They're too busy praising Biden for his strong economic legacy to tell you about the banks that are teetering on the edge of collapse as a result of this empty office space problem. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a reality backed by hard numbers. This isn't fantasy. I'll ask you guys to comment below. How many people do you know have left an office building and haven't gone back to work? They're working from home now. We've got to protect our families and make sure that we're being strategic, especially if most of our savings are sitting right now in these US dollars inside of US banks. We need to be practical and we need to be prepared. So we'll be watching the economy very closely with the incoming administration. Do they make it worse? We will hold them accountable. Or can they fix this disaster? Time will tell. So that's the news update.
You're seeing your grocery bill going higher every time you shop at Walmart. You're not going crazy. Even though official inflation numbers are cooling down, food inflation is still going up, and the company's CEO, Doug McMillon, is sounding the alarm about price hikes this year due to the combination of lower agricultural production in the United States and import tariffs that are expected to go into effect over the next few weeks. Walmart's top boss has lifted the lid on what Americans should expect for grocery prices in the first quarter of 2025. And as you can imagine, it is not good news. McMillan forecasted that food inflation at record highs, even after 4 years of frequent increases, will likely get worse this year. And he said he's disappointed with current prices, pointing to eggs and dairy as key contributors to the latest increases. During the Morgan Stanley Global Consumer and Retail Conference, McMillan stated that stubbornly high inflation will not go away anytime in the foreseeable future and cautioned investors to temper their optimism going into the new year. I don't know what the whole year is going to look like, he said. I hope and I think it could be better as these communities adjust, at least some of them. I'm disappointed to see food inflation started to tick back up. It's primarily driven by eggs and what's happening with dairy right now, the CEO added. But it's not those categories, he continued. There's pressure on cocoa and other inputs, so we look at pricing compared to last week, last month, last year, but we also look at it compared to pre-pandemic. And if you look at all of the food, prices are a lot higher than they were before the pandemic, which is not what the customers want and not what we want. From December 10th to January 10th alone, prices for supermarket food already went up by 1.1%. At Walmart, food prices have jumped by more than 40% since 2020. The biggest monthly raise was recorded in August 2022, when they rose 13.5%. At this point, many customers were hoping that the cost of essentials would be stabilizing. The deflation promised by policymakers is yet to be seen. Macmillan acknowledged that customers are understandably upset because food prices remain substantially higher than they used to be. While non-processed food items are expected to rise modestly, processed packaged goods will face the highest hikes throughout 2025, Macmillan noted. Just a few weeks ago, a discussion on the Walmart subreddit, r/Walmart, claimed that Walmart's egg prices have soared over 140% in just a one-month period in 2024. A Walmart location in Chico, California, a 90-minute drive north of the capital, Sacramento, was seen selling a carton of 18 Great Value eggs, that's Walmart's in-house brand, for $9.52 or 53 cents apiece. A dozen of the same eggs were retailing for $7.22 or 60 cents each. One commenter wrote on the post, "I went with the Walmart brand eggs in the cartons so I could just pour it in the pan and make them. It was nearly $6. I was shocked at the prices because it wasn't long before I saw 12 pieces for like $2 and $3. I knew I wasn't crazy," another wrote. "That's ridiculous," a third person exclaimed. Since January 2019, overall food prices have risen nearly 30% in the U.S., leaving millions of households struggling to afford groceries. For low-income families, grocery shopping is becoming a real financial hurdle. In a new survey by Swiftly, 30% of U.S. households earning less than $56,000 a year reported not having enough money to cover basic groceries, forcing them to make difficult decisions about what to fill their carts with. More people are cutting back on staple foods like fruits and vegetables, which are considered healthier and essential for good nutrition. Now they're getting out the reach of many Americans. For instance, the cost of fresh apples and berries went up by almost 50% since 2021. Instead, shoppers are buying frozen alternatives. Coffee has also become more expensive due to a decrease in agricultural production, making many consumers with tight budgets to go without their daily dose of caffeine. With prices for beef and pork increasing, some families have been trading steaks and ribs for chicken or plant-based proteins such as beans, lentils, and tofu. Snacks from chips to cookies are twice as expensive as they were in 2021, according to Swiftly data. Households are foregoing brands like Doritos and Oreos for store brands that are much cheaper. A systematic review found that fresh seafood, including salmon and shrimp, is becoming a rare indulgence, something reserved only for wealthier individuals. The biggest roadblock to eating seafood is the price. Middle and low-income earners are switching to canned tuna, sardines, or frozen fish for a more affordable alternative. Pre-packaged meals such as frozen dinners or meal kits are about $7 to $10 pricier than they were 1 year ago. That's why Macmillan's warning is so significant. The executive also highlighted that when import tariffs take effect, thousands of goods will have to be marked up again. Ironically, his predictions came right after the company posted its quarterly earnings results, which saw the retail giant post 5.5% revenue growth. CFO John David Rainey is concerned about how higher prices may hurt sales going forward. He said, "Our model is everyday low prices, but there probably will be cases where prices will go up for consumers." He added that almost 40% of the items the big box retailer sells are not made, grown, or assembled in the United States. That means all of those goods will be subject to the tariffs, which many economists believe will push inflation up again. Last week, experts told ABC News that electronics, clothes, and toys will also experience hefty increases under the tariff environment, given that most of these items are imported. In his first term, the elected president also implemented tariffs, though they were much smaller in scale than what he is proposing now. Rainey pointed out, "We've been living under a tariff environment for 7 years, so we're pretty familiar with that. Tariffs, though, are inflationary for customers, so we want to work with suppliers and with our own private brand assortment to try to bring down prices. This time around, they're set to rise by 60% on all Chinese goods, and there will be a 10% across-the-board tariff on all $3 trillion worth of U.S. imports." A report from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, a nonpartisan think tank, estimated that these levies will cost middle-class families at least $1,700 each year. In all, this measure could cost consumers at least $500 billion a year, or at least 1.8% of GDP, according to the Institute. That's roughly 5 times the cost of the U.S.-China trade that started off in 2018. Retail expert Neil Saunders, managing director of global data, told DailyMail.com that the upcoming taxes would cause an enormous headache, make the cost of doing business more expensive for retailers. Tariffs are paid by the companies or entities importing goods, not by the countries themselves, he explained. This means the cost of buying products from overseas, whether directly or as an input for manufacturing, is going to rise sharply. Moreover, farmers and ranchers are voicing their concern about grocery inflation as agricultural soil becomes increasingly unproductive. In a concerning trend that could impact households from all across the nation, the combination of over-farming, climate change, and insufficient sustainable practices has left vast swathes of U.S. farmland degraded and unproductive, threatening our food supply chain and driving up costs. That's not only happening in America. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, estimates that 33% of the Earth's soils are already degraded, and more than 90% could become degraded by the year 2050. According to the FAO, soil erosion occurs naturally under all climatic conditions and on all continents, but it is significantly increased and accelerated by unsustainable human activities, up to 1,000 times. And this is through intensive agriculture, deforestation, through overgrazing, and improper land use changes. Experts noted soil erosion rates are much higher than soil formation rates. Soil is a finite resource, meaning its loss and degradation is not recoverable within a human lifespan. A map previously published by Newsweek predicts that 95% of America's soil will be degraded in less than 30 years. Only a 5% area is marked as not degraded. Basic items including bread, fresh vegetables, and meat are going to see the biggest price hikes. Produce and grains are directly impacted by soil fertility, while the rising cost of feed grains for livestock drives up meat prices. In the United States, between 2016 and 2024, the Consumer Price Index for food has increased every year, said former regenerative farmer Anand Ithirajilu, a project director at the Save Soil Movement and the Rally for Rivers project. While food prices rise, the topsoil in the United States is declining. These two things are intrinsically connected. The U.S. loses billions of metric tons of topsoil annually, impacting food systems and costing the nation $67 billion each year. These depleted soils lead to reduced crop yields, forcing farmers to rely on costly fertilizers and costly irrigation, which drive up food production costs and ultimately drive up consumer prices. Healthy soil is the foundation of our food security, yet it's increasingly vulnerable to erosion, nutrient loss, and climate change. When soil becomes unproductive, it not only threatens our food supply, but also farmers' livelihoods. Etherodula stressed. In other words, this crisis is much deeper than what we're being told. Listen, people's food security is in real danger. We're not only talking about paying more for food, but living in a country that could become unable to feed its population by the end of the decade. At the end of the day, retailers are doing everything they can to save their businesses, though in some cases, price gouging is playing a part in inflation numbers too. But the fact that we're on a countdown until our food systems effectively break takes this situation to a whole new disastrous level. Many Americans are waiting for their country to be fixed in 2025. But it's clear now that some things are indeed beyond repair. What are your thoughts?
Go figure. Follow me.